Now we've got Kathleen Wilson, who's architect at Microsoft Cloud and Infrastructure Management Center of Excellence. That is a job title. She's going to be talking all about modern service management and what that means in Microsoft. So over to you, Kathleen.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. I wish I could have been there. I just couldn't be in two places at once. So I'm actually joining you from Redmond. I'm at our head office here at Microsoft. I'm Canadian, though originally I was going to be in Toronto, but then I ended up having to be in Seattle this week. So I wanted to just kind of get a little bit of a litmus test from all of you in the room is how many people have some type of ITIL certification or subscribe to ITIL by the raise of hands? Okay, we've got some. How many people absolutely detest it? Perfect. Sometimes the people who are accredited are detesting it as well. And how many of you guys are in the role of maybe managing infrastructure? Okay. How many of you are developers? Okay. So I'm just trying to do it. So yeah, I've been at Microsoft now about 12 years, and I've worked mainly in the infrastructure space. And, you know, I was forced to be accredited in ITIL. I ended up being like a trainer and everything for accreditation, but I grew up on the infrastructure and monitoring side of things. So I'm going to just share my desktop now. I don't know if you want to shout out if you have to ask a question or anything else like that, but we'll kind of hold the questions to the end. And if there's anything urgent, just ask Rupert to stop me because I won't be able to see your faces once I start presenting my deck. And let's go into presentation mode. Alrighty. So the name of this presentation is Evolve Cloud Operations and Enable Agile with Modern Service Management. And I wanted to give a little bit of a backstory about this. Is at Microsoft, we have a service management practice. And they mentioned a lot of time that we're technology agnostic. We don't need to know about tools. We don't need to know about Microsoft product. All we need to know is about process. And I called it out and said, no, that's not true. You have a blue badge. You work for Microsoft. And you know what? You need to understand what cloud is. So, you know, really trying to educate my peers within Microsoft that adored ITSM, that were trying to get engaged on cloud engagements or anything on Office 365. We really kind of had to explain to why we had to transform from being traditional IT service management specialists to modern service management specialists. And we kind of refer to it as we're hybrids, that most of us have had a background in technology, but we had to learn and engage with ITIL. So one of the things we really wanted to understand is that businesses demand innovation, right? It hasn't changed in the last 20 years. I've been in IT. They want it faster. They want the cost to go down. Agility, I think agility is the make or break thing that nowadays, if you're not agile, you're out of a job. And then allow for repeatability.
You, Kathleen.
Yes.
We're seeing like the sort of normal view of PowerPoint, not the presentation layout.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Wow, I wonder how that is. Okay, let me stop sharing for a second. I apologize.
No worries.
I'm just learning this Google, so I'm going to present. I'm going to go to a window, and is that what you want to, just tell me, is that what you want to see?
Yeah, that's looking good. That's great. Thanks.
That's perfect. No, thank you for letting me know. So what we tried to do is come up with a new objective of what we were going to create ITSM to enable DevOps and more agility, is that we're going to take our ITSM experts and change the way they were thinking. It's not process for process sake, but working on understanding the outcomes to evolve our customers from being legacy on-premise, non-agile customers to being efficient, agile, and being able to perform DevOps. So trying to explain is how, you know, the traditional enterprise and how we go to the modern enterprise. So a lot of the time, what we've been trying to do is talk to our customers and our peers internally. It was like, this is the way it was, and this is the way it would be. In the traditional enterprise, the business unit or the service consumer, you know, went to IT for everything. It was the one-stop shop for anything technology. And IT, would act as an intermediary. They did the service design, they did the transition, and they did the operation. In the modern enterprise, we're looking at getting biz DevOps teams and looking at IT as a partner and IT as a broker. So leveraging things like public cloud, private cloud, or other clouds, hybrid clouds, to enable, quicker procurement, automation, and more agility. So a lot of these things is when we're trying to explain, what it means for the IT pros or infrastructure specialists to how they are going to evolve. Because if they don't evolve, they're going to be out of a job. That's basically what's going to happen. There's a no ops. We're seeing a lot of developers just with cloud patterns are able to deploy their own infrastructure and manage it, specifically when they start using PaaS services. So we need to kind of transform the thought processes and the behaviors of people in IT to be able to adopt, modern deployment patterns, understand what it means to be agile. So traditionally, IT was the intermediary. They were the ones that kind of slowed everything down. In modern IT, it's like, get out of the way or provide those guardrails for me to actually deploy my code into production or through my environments. The way we used to do things at Microsoft was very wave-based, right? If you looked at how we evolved at Microsoft, we used to have service packs. How many people here remember service packs? And I'm guessing by the head nods in the room, a lot of people have been burnt by service packs. Now when we're going to the branching and services model is that we have a continuous iteration-based release cycle, right? It's what we liken it to is instead of big smoking craters from wave-based, it's like there's small grass fires. You can decide whether or not you want to roll back or roll forward. A lot of things that we're trying to talk to customers about and also our peers is that the deployment pattern change is that, you need to design applications and code to run in, I would liken it to the cloud being a little bit about a fun house, like those fun houses where their lights are blinking. So what you need to do is design your applications and services for resiliency, not necessarily redundancy, because the cloud takes care of that redundancy. We used to delegate things in IT silos. There's always been this huge wall, as you've seen in many of the presentations between developers and operations, is that they're very siloed. In order to be agile and embrace DevOps, you need to be looking at things from an end-to-end service capability. Though ITIL talked about it a lot, I don't think we actually ingrained the tooling or the behavioral change within organizations to manage end-to-end services. Processes lived in documents. You spent months optimizing. We're always redesigning our processes. And now in a modern IT is that we want self-service, we want knowledge, we want low friction, and we want to automate the hell out of everything, right? So automate the end-to-end functions of a service and how it's managed, because I don't think many people nowadays expect to, call a service desk or a help desk to get assistance. They go to a website, and we're pretty savvy now that we can actually do our own self-service. Automation was manually initiated. You had to wait for the guy to press the button or the gal to press the button. Now that automation should be systemic, triggered, and automation. There was great presentations earlier today, on how to use ARM templates, PowerShell DSC. These are things that have to be inherent and ingrained in the DNA of IT nowadays. Monitoring was really focused on element or component. Is that component up or down? What we really try to talk to customers now when we go to end-to-end monitoring is instead of monitoring for ups and downs is to monitor for capabilities. So an example of capability monitoring would be when you actually think about ATM banking machines, right? You would monitor banking machines, of course, to see if the components are up or down, but you also want to monitor for the capabilities that the customers are using the ATMs for. So are they able to make withdrawals? Can they deposit? Can they do balance updates? Can they do transfers? Again, that's really where we need to look at the telemetry and how we monitor applications in an agile world to actually monitor for capabilities. Support, again, we kind of liken support moving to more where the expert desks and the genius bars that are in organizations now, such as Apple and Microsoft, where people go in and make an appointment and we help the customer to help themselves. Life cycle, again, we're looking at current and then N+1, but in the traditional IT worlds, where they're N+, N-1, N-2, N-3. And then configuration management, this really trips a lot of ITSM people who are really ingrained. They talk to us as like, we want to import all the CIs, in Azure into our CMDB. And it's like, no, it's likening to used to produce your own electricity. Now you buy electricity from Microsoft, and you really should be only monitoring whether or not when you flick on the switch, is the power on or is the power off. So these things were challenging for many organizations to make themselves move that way. So how did we do this? About a year ago, maybe 18 months ago, the Cloud and Enterprise Group, are asking us is like, help our customers become more agile with cloud. We have customers that want to do DevOps. We have customers that want to do rapid cloud development. But the operations model and how they use the cloud is not clearly defined of how they go from zero to agile. So a group of my smart buddies and I at Microsoft came up with a modern service management. Initially, it was called a 12-step program, but in North America, 12-step programs is used for alcoholics. And we really didn't want to align our modern service management journey with a rehab program. So what we did is we started moving things to a customer journey map. So when we started looking at how customers, need to be agile, moving from, and again, I have a stronger infrastructure lens on this, is that, we need to really answer the why cloud, why agile, why DevOps. And the first step is that organizations are usually, getting out of the data center business, they're burning cash, or they're trying to break into new markets. And really positioning with the folks who do the work, because we're moving a lot of pieces of cheese in the organizations, that we have a tactical problem, such as we can't be agile enough, but we have a strategic opportunity. So that would be the first step. Then we'd be moving into is like talking about, let's talk to the people and understand why we need to do this change and what this change entails. So we really start looking at adoption and change management. What we really want to do is when we're looking at Agile and DevOps, you can't do DevOps everywhere. You can't be Agile everywhere. A lot of times we talk to customers, it's like, let's have a single application or service that we can put a box around, and that we start building out that capability for, an Agile mode of operations and development with that. We can't do it everywhere. As we move through, is like, now that we've talked, we're going Agile, we need to tool and our development tools, our operations tools, and our service management tools to become more agile. We need to enable service provisioning. And we also need to be looking, that was my phone. We need to enable service provisioning because, we were talking to one customer and, they really love the modern service management journey. We got them set up into Azure, and the account team started going up to us and said, we're not seeing them deploying more apps and services into Azure. We're actually, from what we hear, they're deploying more into the other cloud provider. And when we did the investigation and diagnosis of that, it wasn't necessarily that the other cloud provider was better, is that they hadn't evolved their development and deployment patterns and enabled service provisioning. They still had to go to the guy to push the button to put things into Azure. And from a developer standpoint, it's like, we need to get new code out there as quickly as possible. I'm not going to wait for this guy to set up an environment for me. I'm just going to go and do it the other cloud provider, because they had spent the time and the money and the investment in the people to actually do the tooling in it. And as we go further on, but one of the other things is that we found is this message can't be just with one group of people. We need to involve the business, the IT operations, development, and operations all together in one room. We can't make this decision as, we're going to go to cloud from an operational perspective and not understand what our customers who are developers, and that's where I think a lot of people in IT operations, they feel that the business is the customer and that the business buys infrastructure, and it's not. The actual customer, if you're an IT pro or in operations, your customers are the developers that build services and applications on top of the platforms that you provide. So one of the things is we need to shift that lens of, infrastructure for infrastructure's sake, is understanding infrastructure to support the agility and the deployment of new apps. We have to define a target end state, and then we have to move the people along and the technology to provide the outcome. So as I move forward, I'm going to go a little bit into more of the steps. But, some of the symptoms of, organizations that have a problem with becoming agile is that they have a lack of collaboration between dev and ops teams, and they have unclear accountabilities. They don't understand the fully deployed end-to-end services. About 7 years ago, I was working with an internal team in Microsoft, and we were going to deploy a new service, which was based in Azure, to allow customers to assess their technology platforms such as Exchange and Active Directory and everything. And one of the things when I went to go and talk to the people, because these were developers and they were not, they didn't come from a background of doing operations. They didn't know how it, it means to put the customer first, be customer obsessed. They didn't understand how they had to transform their roles in order to do that. And from that opportunity, it's like, we're going to provision something. It's going to go into production. It's like, how are you going to deal with the customer feedback loop mechanism when they have an issue? How are you going to manage alerts? So a lot of these things is that we need to describe to the people in the room who were dev focused, where they needed to become dev and operations focused. And that, understanding is like, how are we going to staff this up? How are we going to manage it? And from out of that, we needed to understand and change the mindset. So at Microsoft, we use this ProSci approach to change management. And the change management is focused on the human aspect of change, not IT change management as how processes. So we use the capability from a communications and change management perspective is understanding and building awareness, building desire through stakeholders, getting people to kind of lean in and get excited about the change, share with them how to do the change. So this is your job today. When you move into the new world and the agile world, this is what your job's going to look at it. And enable the ability and reinforce that. So some of the things when you move from, infrastructure perspective that you're non-agile, you're waterfall, and what are the measures and the metrics that my manager is going to measure me on from a metrics point of view as when we move to agile. The other thing is what we like to do with customers in trying to move to agile is to put a box around it. Or what we have here is this is what we call a service map. And we go into customers and they'll say, well, we want to put, application Apollo into the cloud. Well, what we do is we draw this service map where we, just explore and document all the components, underpinning services, and then we go through the activities of identifying the people that are responsible for these components and services, and that we bring them together as being the new organization to move forward of how we're going to operate in an agile mode. It's easier to go by application and service than trying to do DevOps everywhere. Then we need to kind of identify and upgrade some of our development operations and service management tools. So looking at the tools that span the service lifecycle, we need to ensure that we build out, capabilities through ARM templates so developers can deploy into production. We need to integrate, a portal capability for people to make requests for incidents or new services. We need to improve our monitoring, as we need to do end-to-end service monitoring, and also the alerts should be going to the developers so they can actually be more agile in addressing bugs. Sorry, it's a build slide. Okay. So how do we do this? Well, what we've kind of done is overlay the traditional waterfall approach of service management and we overlay our Microsoft DevOps approach over the IT service lifecycle. So what is we do is we look at building up tools to build out a release pipeline. If you haven't seen already, a really good paper is the release pipeline model. It was written by Michael Green and a few others at Microsoft, but it really kind of explains to, and there's a few great Channel 9 videos on it as well. It explains to our typical infrastructure folks is what is a release pipeline, right? And how do we manage end-to-end services, engaging, Visual Studio, engaging, Azure templates. So how do we move from development and build to test to production and incorporate customer care and feedback loops in order for us to improve our Agile services? And this is probably where most organizations make the mistake that they try to manage their Agile DevOps services using legacy tool sets, right? Because it's only forcing people to do things manually, and it's also forcing people to become that, people in operations to become the intermediary to developers to deploying code into production, because they're waiting for them to spin up an environment and push the button to allow them to push into production. Planning enabling automated service provisioning is difficult depending on type of the organization. So if you look at a traditional organization, when we start talking about Agile and DevOps, they start using the word governance, and governance to them is to slow things down. They've come from a very manual organization, and then we're trying to bring them into the Agile and DevOps frame of mind where they haven't automated a lot of their processes. So we need to spend a little bit more time on the automation of manual processes. If we look at the startups, I think a lot of you've read the Puppet Lab State of the DevOps, and they talk about, how many releases Google does a day and Facebook and everything else like that. But we at Microsoft have a lot of traditional customers like Ford, who come through a very manual process of designing and building cars. And we rarely do a lot of work. Well, we have a smaller percentage of the Teslas or the fully automated automotive manufacturing processes. So we don't spend enough time to help improve the maturity of service provisioning and deployment and automating processes. This is where I think a lot more time needs to be spent and investment. One of the things I always recommend to most organizations is, do you have a chief automation officer? And they're like, what? I said, you need to have somebody who's responsible of looking at menial tasks, low value tasks, and understanding why they're not going to be automated. I think many of you people here are familiar with Chef. And about 4 months ago, I met the CIO, the CTO of Chef at another DevOps conference. And I'm like, how do you do this? Like, how do you move from that? And one of the things is like how he trained and rewarded people. So the idea is that when they have their team meetings, they talk about what they automated and the efficiency gains. And he said, we treat it almost like a work of art, like when people actually do the investment in automation. And the skill sets and the training and a lot of stuff, because a lot of people who are in infrastructure are afraid of coding. And really it's like investing with them to teach them how to do coding, and scripting is very important. Evolve your development and deployment patterns. Most of you are in London, so the right side of the page, the screen will not be so scary to you, but I'm telling you, if you go to America, as I was driving yesterday into the office, there's a roundabout near the Microsoft office to improve traffic flow. It still was a little crazy. But if we think about traditional IT, it's about enforcing and controlling via the cab. Nothing gets put into production unless it goes through cab. And I liken it to, IT that runs as an intersection with lights, right? It's controlled, it has central responsibility, and it's not very agile. When we look at continuous release and continuous integration and continuous approach in the release pipeline, what we're trying to do is actually enable roundabouts. And if I talk to a few of my colleagues in Australia, they've gone even a step forward, and they said, we're doing roundabouts with driverless cars. I'm like, well, okay, that's a vast step to go forward in. But one of the things we need to do is address the gap between stoplights and roundabouts, and work on what it takes to be an organization that has stoplights at every intersection, and enable them and support them in building roundabouts at every intersection. So again, if you set up your release pipeline accordingly, you have ARM templates, you have scripts to set up the guardrails. So, you're not going to have developers driving off the road. I think this will enable the governance and the control to be likened through automation and extreme standardization of services. Another step is what we do is we identify, train, and prepare the people. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what IT project in it. If you don't win the hearts and minds of the people who are going to have to support this moving forward, you're going to fail. In the 24 years I've been in IT, most of the engagements, and I spent 12 plus years as a consultant, most of the engagements failed because we hadn't won the hearts and the minds of the people and prepared them to do their work in a new world with new tool sets. Many of you, I'm sure, are consultants in the room, and you can understand, I usually say that IT loves to change the world of the business users and the people around them. But if you change their tools, they're going to be, running, kicking, and screaming and pushing back. So identifying it's that, we don't push buttons to deploy, compute into the cloud anymore. We automate it. We make it self-service. We make it highly repeatable. We don't put things into clouds without end-to-end monitoring. So identifying, training, and preparing people. What we do sometimes at Microsoft is we do get a lot of pushback when we start talking about cloud and agile to infrastructure folks, because they're only used to the ways that they did things on premise. And we need to actually partner up and say, hey, you have architects in your organization. Have you thought about them taking, architecting for Azure and getting them accredited and certified? We have a plethora of online consulting, webcasts, and training. I think the next best thing is to actually build out learning paths and certification paths for the roles that are moving to Agile. Identify and select monitoring tools and automation hooks. You probably saw a few demos today with Jeffrey demoing Microsoft Operations Management Suite and Azure Stack, and some of the other capabilities of our tools is like, how are we going to automate and do the telemetry and the collection and the management of services. So when we move an application into Azure, is like there may be some on-prem components that still need to be monitored. What type of automation and deployment patterns do we want to build? Or if there's a fault, do we just want to spin up the instance again or shut it down? And then this kind of upsets the ITSM folks at Microsoft, is that, oh my gosh, you're identifying the process of models and the gap at step 9. How can you do that? It's way too late in the process. And it's like, what we like to liken it to is that there should be just enough process. We look at the customer's current business model. What are their roles and responsibilities? What are their required processes? And we come up with governance recommendations. We talk about health models, and then we move into things. What are you going to do for daily operations? Another big challenge of what we find is it takes time for people to learn how to be agile or learn to adopt new support. So what we recommend is when we move new products and services into agile operations, is that the people that are supporting that no longer support the old infrastructure. They don't do the legacy support of IT operations. We only move them forward. So what we ask our customers to do is backfill the legacy IT operations roles with either contingent staff, hire on some new hires to build up that, and only let the people who are in IT operations work in an agile method and improve that way. Then we ask customers to implement the changes to existing processes. So as I said, we transition the former IT operations people to their new agile roles. We help them training the jobs, and then we work on the changing the organization through governance and dependencies, again, with just enough process to be very, very agile. And then the idea is to build out that blueprint, describing what the dedicated organization looks like, what are the accountabilities and roles for the new services, and what are the delegations and dependencies on the new services and agile approach. Basically, having this blueprint and having this approach will allow organizations to migrate new applications and services over to an agile operations. So I'm just about 15 minutes short of time, so I'm going to just stop sharing for a second, and I wanted to ask if any of you guys had any questions or feedback.
How are you finding it?
The modern service management, it's
with your customers.
It's a challenge, but they love the story. So one of the things we found with it is the one slide where I showed you the old and the new. A lot of people talked about that. That's the money slide. One of the things we found is when you pitch modern service management or agile, it's very difficult to pitch it to the manager of IT operations, right? Because they don't want to change. They see job recognition. But if we move up higher in the organization to the CTO, CIO, the modern service management story resonates better with them. A few months ago, back in August, I had an opportunity to present with our premier support for developers. And these are our premier PFEs that are responsible for supporting customers in agile organizations. And they love the messaging around modern service management because they realize that there needs to be processes, but the old ITSM model was a little antiquated, a little slow to enable DevOps or agility. So a lot of people like the modern service management approach. We do have a Channel 9 video. I'll give you the link for it. We have a Channel 9 video, and there's a full white paper that you can download on it that actually goes into more details where we went into the roles and the KPIs as well with it. So one of the things we found, I believe people really, really like it. Jeffrey Snover looked at it a few months ago, and he really, really liked it. I think one of the biggest challenges where we need to take it from a Microsoft organization is to, this is why you need to do it. This is what modern service management is. And then now we need to align our artifacts into the how we do it. Does that make sense? Like if I talked about it, it's like I could actually show you, you know, what you need to do. And then here are scripts, here are, you know, ARM templates, here are artifacts such as job descriptions, which you can apply to your new organization. And we are building this momentum within Microsoft, and we are publishing it regularly in the white paper. We've got a new release coming up of it, where we were going to actually integrate some of the artifacts that we've harvested over the years now, about the over 18 months at Microsoft. Did I answer your question?
That's great.
Good.
Thanks, Kathleen. Any other questions?
Well, I wanted to share with you a couple things. So if you go to Channel 9, and I'm just going to show with you, we do have a modern service management video on what is modern service management, where we go into details, very much like this presentation. And then if you go to the Modern Service Management on Azure.com. We have a Modern Service Management white paper. I'm just going to get the link for you. I should have had that. I don't know why I didn't have that. We call it Modern Service Management for Azure, but it's really about what we talk about things. So if you go to azure.microsoft.com and type in Modern Service Management for Azure, we actually have a download available there for you to take this white paper and leverage it with your customers. That's it. So if there aren't any questions, what I want to do is I'm just going to share this slide back up very quickly. Please, please connect with me on LinkedIn or on Twitter. I put my my Twitter handle is at @MKathleenWilson, all one word. Also, connect with me in LinkedIn as well, as we've built out a modern service management community within LinkedIn, where we're doing some more frequent blogging on this and sharing this stuff. And then with our Channel 9 video and as well as the white paper, we're going to be regularly updating that. So if you follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter, you're definitely going to get updates on that. So I'm not the last presentation of the day. I'm just coming up to 9:00 a.m. here in Redmond. It was an early morning for me. But I realized that there's going to be cocktails later and some beer and some pints to be had. So there's one more presentation. I know Kenneth is presenting in this track right after this from Microsoft. He's an excellent speaker. And I want to thank you very much for your time. Again, I apologize that I couldn't be there in person, but have a great day. It looks like it's beautiful out in London because I can see the sun shining through the windows there.
Sort of, maybe a bit cloudy, but...
Okay, it's raining in Seattle in the Redmond area, nothing new. And in Toronto, we're having a heat wave and it's like 28 degrees Celsius and sunny. So wow. I think my wish was to be in London, but I ended up in Seattle. Now I'm missing home because it's so hot and we're having what we call our last kick at summer, Indian summer. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time. And if somebody want to leave the room or you guys want, I can stay online for the next 15 minutes or so. If you have any questions, you just want to ask them to me personally, that's fine as well. So thank you.
Well, I'm going to say thanks very much for putting in the effort to make this work. We're all very pleased it worked.
Thank you guys.
So, and thanks very much, Kathleen.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. And we'll sign off now and get Kenneth set up. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.